Hello and a warm welcome. The Modi Sarkar, it's celebrating its second year in office with a lot of band and baja. But we're going to look over the next 1 hour at the performance metrics of various ministries, the ministers of the Modi government. This is India Today CMS special broadcast. I want to bring in our guests for this program, starting of course with Rajdeep Sardesai. He's joining us here in our newsroom. Also with us at this time is Raj Chingappa, India Today's editorial director. We've got PN Vasanti. She's the Director General of CMS. Worked very hard with her team putting this poll together. Also with us Kumar Ketkar from Mumbai, well-known political journalist. Rakesh Sinha heads the India Policy Foundation. Welcome to all our guests. I want first for Vasanti to explain the methodology that was used by CMS in looking at the different performance metrics which we'll be analyzing over the next 1 hour.
Thank you, Rahul. As you know, that CMS has been conducting various polls over a long period of time, and this was a special appraisal methodology that we created to assess how the government is doing currently. And we not only looked at the performance of the Prime Minister, but also looked at various ministries. We selected 20 ministries and 20 ministers. Also looked at what schemes are popular and why aren't they not popular. And plus we also looked at MPs and what are people thinking about MPs' performance at this time. I want to make a word of caution that this is not a report card. It's more of looking at what are the gaps and what needs to be more done right now. So I'm not giving a pass or a fail to this, but I'm looking at more of where are we today after 2 years of performance at various levels.
There's some very interesting insights in the results that the CMS poll have thrown up. And I'm going to take it one by one, starting of course with the report card of the Prime Minister himself, because the first question is about the performance of the Prime Minister, and let's see what respondents told CMS. The overall performance of the Prime Minister is rated as being good or exceptional by 62% of the respondents. 20% think the performance is average. 18% think the performance is poor. This is when it comes to the Prime Minister's overall performance. I'll start with Rajdeep Sardesai. Halfway through his tenure, 60% people thinking that you're doing a good job. That's a fair approval rating to have.
That's a fair approval rating to have. It's not a great one. A great approval rating would be 70 plus in most such polls. 60% says yes, you're doing a good job, but clearly the euphoria of 2014. Had we done this poll in 2014, it would be definitely above 75%. Had we done it even at the start of his tenure, it would have been even higher. So a year later, I think there is a slight decline. But yes, once you are around 60%, you have reason to believe that anti-incumbency hasn't set in. Okay. There isn't any anger or any disillusionment yet. As far as this poll suggests, there is still some faith, residue of faith in the Prime Minister.
Rakesh Sinha, not exceptional ratings these, but definitely not unsatisfactory either. 60% is good. Do you think after 2 years of being in power, that's a fair rating for a Prime Minister like Modi to have?
I think Prime Minister's popularity is undiminished. I say because not because of this only this survey, but also there are regions. You see the Award Vapsi group. They have made a chorus against the Prime Minister and the government, despite such kind of things which created negative atmosphere in the country. Okay. In that situation, if Prime Minister is getting 62%, that this is a fair rating. And I think if the scope of survey is enlarged, I think this rating will go up.
Okay, I want to now look at what people believe to be the Prime Minister's biggest achievement. Amongst the options that were given were global image, his administrative abilities. Let's take you through the findings of this CMS opinion poll. 33% think the Prime Minister has been able to bolster India's global image. 14% think it's the administration. 36% think it's both. So now there are two ways of looking at this, Raj Chingappa. One is global image is perceptional, and Modi is credited with being a good marketer, and therefore is it partly because of his global positioning that people believe he's elevated India's position, because the key metric there should really be whether he's administering India better than the previous government. There only 14% of the respondents seem to agree with that suggestion. Mr. Chingappa.
Well, certainly on foreign policy he's done, outstandingly. I mean, he's traveled across the globe. He's brought in foreign direct investment. You can see the results. But I think the overall rating that he's getting, the 62%, and I agree with it, you know, it's a fairly fair assessment of it, is because the economy still continues to do well at 7.6%. There is a perception that corruption at high levels has certainly come down after Mr. Modi as compared to UPA. So, I mean, on these three factors, you would see that he gets good rating. I think where he doesn't get the others, as Rajdeep was saying, moving up to 70-75%, is because one, he hasn't been able to get along with the opposition, and two, there is a perception that he has not come down hard enough on divisive forces in the country and is needlessly, in many occasions, being diverted away from his development agenda.
Okay, I want to come now to the next question that was put by CMS. This is about whether the Prime Minister has been able to fulfill the various promises that he made before taking office. On the issue of fulfilling promises, only 1/3 of the respondents feel that promises have been fulfilled. About half the respondents think the promises have been partially fulfilled. I want to ask Rajdeep first. 2 years in, if 1/3 of the people already feel that you fulfilled your promise, that would be reason for joy.
It's again a middling. It's a glass half full or a glass half empty. The Prime Minister would think that way. Look, I've fulfilled 1/3 of my promises. The other way to look at it, 2/3 still remain. Yes, you've got 3 years to go. But remember, your last year is the build-up to election year 2019. So I think the Prime Minister's got to look at key areas. To my mind, 2 key areas still remain. The job crisis. Remember, he had promised 5 crore jobs, 1 crore of jobs every year. That's not happened. The other big promise was alleviating agrarian distress. That hasn't happened. He's been unfortunate that we've had 2 consecutive droughts. But I think the empathy has been missing, both with those job seekers and with those suffering from agrarian distress. I would like to see greater empathy. No one is blaming the Prime Minister for the job crisis or the agrarian crisis. But when you make those promises, you've got to at least be a little more willing to concede that maybe you've not achieved as much. I think that's the reason why it's only 33%.
Rakesh Sinha, you concede this, that there's lack of empathy, and that both on agrarian distress and in job creation, achievement hasn't quite been the same as the promises that have been made.
Rahul, it's a question of intention of the government, and the people realize that the Prime Minister and his government has intention for the people. I say 2 things. You just see, the government has taken the oath, and after taking the oath, the first decision this government has taken, that's self-verification. That is a very important decision. You have faith on your own citizens. So I think that there is a co-linking between the citizen and the government, and the participation of the citizens have increased in other ways.
And I want to put this question first to PN Vasanti and also to Kumar Ketkar. I'll start with Kumar Ketkar because it's correct that halfway through the other governments, whether it's the government of, say, Rajiv Gandhi, Indira Gandhi, they became increasingly popular. Even after the big 71 war, when she was hailed as Durga Mata, she still became very unpopular. She became, even Rajiv Gandhi became unpopular halfway through what was the biggest mandate in several decades. So therefore, 2 years in, there's no major crisis. Is that not, Kumar Ketkar, something the Prime Minister can take home and be happy about?
Well, actually, if you look at that kind of a historical record, maybe Prime Minister can say it's everything fine. But actually, all those troubles started 2.5 years later. 1984-85 January, Rajiv Gandhi became Prime Minister, and it was only in 87 March onwards that the crisis began in Rajiv Gandhi government. Similarly, 1970 March, Mrs. Gandhi was elected, and sometime in 1973 June, actually in April, JP had his first rally in Bihar, which I covered. So I know the sequence. Actually, it begins after 2.5 years. First 2.5 years were hunky-dory for Indira as well as Rajiv after 71 and after 1984.
Let's come to the question about the ease of doing business. And on this crucial promise that the Prime Minister's made, because he said, I would make it easier for people to do business in India. Has he actually fulfilled that promise? To what extent do people agree? Let me take you through the findings of the CMS study on the ease of doing business. 1/3 of the respondents think that to a large extent, it's easier to do business now than earlier. 51% think to some extent it's easier to do business. Only 16%, Rajdeep, think it's not been easier to do business. Now that, if you add the two, that's 84% think to some extent that promise has been fulfilled.
I think this is a major achievement. Within the constraints of our system, where for the longest time it was felt you could not be seen as an openly pro-business Prime Minister or leader, I think Prime Minister Modi has done a great job. That 33% plus 51, as you said, adds up to 84. Mr. Modi, I think, has sensed the mood in terms of Indians wanting to create more wealth for themselves, be more aspirational, maybe be entrepreneurial. So whether it's Skill India, Make in India, it's all directed towards his energies, towards what he calls the neo-middle class. And I think he's been extremely successful in this regard in pushing that agenda.
But PN Vasanti, critics can argue that the only person to whom this question should be put is a CEO or a business executive or an entrepreneur who's setting up his own business. You ask any normal person on the road whether it's easier to do business, unless he's actually in business, his response means very little.
Absolutely right, Rahul, and that's what I was trying to explain to you, why this study is unique, because we interviewed only stakeholders. So we asked farmers about agrarian issues and the Ministry of Agriculture and the Minister of Agriculture and issues related to that. So we asked about business with only the business community. So it is not a general public opinion survey that you're talking about here. We're talking about a very unique assessment methodology which included a survey of 4,000 stakeholders of respective ministers and ministries, including corporate India. That is what you're seeing the result now.
Okay, I want to come now to the major initiatives, because remember, this government has been about Skill India, Stand Up India, Startup India. Let me take our viewers through the responses on the question about the big achievements of the Modi government. Now, CMS asked people which one they thought was the biggest achievement. 36% said Jan Dhan Yojana, 32% said Swachh Bharat, 23% said FDI. Rajdeep, what do you make of this? Because in that 36%, there are critics who say that millions of those accounts have no money, and therefore, what purpose does it serve?
That's again, it's the glass half full, half empty. What you said is the glass half empty. You have all these accounts, you're resorting to statistics, the macro numbers look good, but many of those accounts have very little money in them. But I think the larger message of financial inclusion here works for the Prime Minister. I think he's been extremely successful, whether it's been with direct benefit transfer, LPG subsidies, as well as Jan Dhan Yojana. The message has gone out that the Prime Minister is himself personally associated with these measures, and many people believe that this is exactly what a government needs to do. I think financial inclusion at the end of the day is more likely to win him votes than Make in India.
And Kumar Ketkar, no matter who the critic, the reality is once you're in the financial net, then at some point in time the benefits will come to you. Let it not be, if it's not a LPG subsidy, because that won't happen with the poorest of the poor, then surely direct benefit transfers, subsidies reaching into your account. At some point in time, the infrastructure that's being set up, the fact that you've got all these people now part of your financial system, that will benefit the common Indian, the Aam Aadmi.
Well, actually, when reality will catch up with the virtual reality that he has created by a huge propaganda machine and all kinds of man ki baat and interviews, I think that virtual reality is yet to be erased, and that will be erased by the reality check, and the reality check will be on the ground in terms of price rises, in terms of actual jobs, in terms of inflation hurting them directly, not only in the budget discussions, the so-called deficit planning, and all that will work only in the intellectuals, English press and the middle class. Middle class is only 35 crores out of 125 crores, and this rest of the people are yet to see the major benefit. The Jan Dhan Yojana must have gone to some people, I am not denying that, but the question is not that Jan Dhan Yojana has gone to some people. The question is how far it has created the impact at the ground level, like perhaps it was made by the 20-point program in 1976. But that doesn't mean
Rakesh
that
Sinha, you want to
actually
respond to
anything
this?
has been substantially
Kumar
achieved.
Ketkar saying it's more about perception than about reality. There are more empty accounts, and therefore the perception is exaggerated. Let Rakesh Sinha respond.
Kumar Ketkar is a skillful person. He makes reality in perception and perception a reality. I think this government has created a financial inclusion, and there are two examples. That social concern and the people's concern are connected with the governance. For the first time, the politics and social issues are correlated. One thing, the best example is the cleanliness of Ganga. Second is the Swachhta Abhiyan. This Swachhta Abhiyan, the people's participation. You can't expect any society, any nation or any government to do miracle in a year or 2 years. But there is a social index of social consciousness has gone up.
I now want to come to what people believe are the failures of the Modi Sarkar. Let's take them one by one. People were asked to pick which one they thought was the biggest failure. 32% say inflation, 29% say unemployment, 26% say black money. And I want to start with Raj Chingappa, because if you look at the international factors at this time, Raj, inflation is actually better off than it's ever likely to be, with crude hovering. I mean, now it's $50 just now, but it's been around 30, 35, 40 for a very long time. These 2 years have been golden years when it comes to crude oil pressures. If despite that, so many people are unhappy with the inflation situation, this is going to be a challenge in the years to come. Now crude is showing an upsurge, going past 50 once again. Inflation is a tricky one to control.
Rahul, I agree. If you look at it, the three things that are really going wrong with him, he should be he should be worried. Inflation, yes, certainly, you know, his government could claim it is at a historic low. But if you look at food inflation, and certainly dal prices and everything else, that's what's hit the common man. Then let's look at jobs. Despite the economy growing at 7.6%, if you recall, India today put on its cover the job famine. All the key sectors were not generating the jobs that they'd done in the previous years. So this is a crisis that he needs to go. Whether it is because of international, events that have happened, whether, certain sectors have not picked up, if the public perception on these two key factors that determine a lot of elections, inflation and jobs, do not improve, Mr. Modi is in trouble for re-election.
Rajdeep, even job crisis, you spoke of it briefly earlier, that's a big challenge. All the growth that's happened hasn't led to jobs which would ensure that all the millions of youth who are entering the job market find the jobs that they need.
Absolutely. First, most surveys like this will always put inflation at the top. You ask someone what's wrong, they'll say price rise. So I think that is a given. It's unemployment, I think, which is the bigger problem, because it's one thing to say the economy is growing at 7.6%, we're the fastest growing economy in the world. People want to know, what does it mean for me in terms of money in my wallet, in terms of a job for me in the marketplace. I think Skill India, great idea, but on the ground, I am not seeing, or no one is giving me any hard data to show there is a multiple increase in skilled jobs that are available in the market. Manufacturing has not taken off. So Mr. Modi has to hope that 2017, as most economists believe, will be when the turnaround takes place. But in 2016 itself, I think this is the biggest area which should concern him, and particularly because he's raised expectations so high. When you said 1 crore jobs a year, when you gave people the sense that you were going to bring in Achhe Din, part of Achhe Din was not just ending big ticket corruption, where you could claim some success, but it was also in providing productive jobs.
In the failures, while corruption was always one of the biggest problems with the UPA Kumar Ketkar, 2 years in, almost halfway through your tenure, there hasn't been a single big corruption charge against any Modi Sarkar minister. We've been following the Eknath Khadse story in Maharashtra, that's a Fadnavis minister, but none of the big ministers or any of the ministers in the Modi Sarkar have a corruption taint against them.
No.
Well, Rahul, I don't think you are taking a proper view of corruption. Corruption is not only related to the top ministerial jobs. Corruption is directly what is experienced by the people at the local office. It may be rationing office, it may be passport office, it may be Mantralaya, it may be normal bureaucratic office from education to medicine. And corruption is still there. In fact, if you recall just 5 years ago,
you may say corruption is there, Kumar Ketkar, but when it comes to looking at the failures, Mr. Ketkar, hear me, Mr. Ketkar. Mr. Ketkar, hear me. You may think it's a failure, but I'm saying the CMS report finds that people don't believe corruption in the current milieu is an issue for them. They haven't mentioned it amongst what they hold against the government.
CMS survey.
The big scams.
I am not talking of CMS survey, I am talking about the corruption experienced by the people on the ground.
Statutory warning on corruption, Rahul. When you said big ticket corruption, if you remember, most of the scams of the UPA took place in UPA 1, but were unraveled in UPA 2.
Sure.
So, we have to hold,
And there was a Vinod Rai who made it happen as well.
Even though I do believe that the Prime Minister personally has made a genuine effort to try and put his ministers under notice, under watch, and I think he deserves credit for that, both in the context of cronyism, barring 1 or 2 exceptions, and in the case of corruption, he's made a genuine effort to put ministers on the watch. But I would like to see what happens 5 years from now, because there are rumors that continue to swirl about certain ministers who continue to believe that it's business as usual.
Okay, fair enough, but those rumors have to lead to some concrete evidence against them. Only then can they be considered bona fide charges of corruption. We're slipping into a break. When we come back, the more interesting part of the CMS findings. Who are the best mantris? Who are the worst mantris? Which are the best ministries? Which are the worst ministries? That and more when we return on the other side of a quick break. You're watching this India Today special broadcast on the 2 years of the Modi Sarkar.